Hello, hello. So, I want to say about this moment when I was sitting next to my mom at a parent-teacher conference, and my Year 10 English teacher said to her, Lena is the perfect student. She is going to be successful in anything she does in life, and there is no way she can fail. And see, at that point in high school, I had really failed at pretty much nothing that actually mattered to me. See, when I was in high school, I got 7 medals for being an outstanding student. At 16, I went to university and got a scholarship to study law and languages. And there was this one other accolade that I had spent my entire life trying to train for and become the best at. And it was how to be Miss Perfect. But you see, I had studied really how to do everything to be the absolute perfect Lena that everybody wanted me to be. I got the tick of approval from my teachers, I got the tick of approval from my parents and from my friends. And I basically knew exactly what I needed to say, exactly what I needed to do, and exactly who I needed to be to not step on anybody's shoes and to be accepted by anybody that I met. But you see, one day in my 4th year of law school, I had a complete nervous breakdown. And I was on the path to becoming the successful international lawyer when something in me cracked. And I realized that this heavy load I was carrying, this mask I was putting on for everybody, I just couldn't take it anymore. And I decided to drop out of law school and do the one thing that was completely opposite to anything I'd ever been told. I became an entrepreneur. I moved to Germany from Australia, and I decided I'm going to start my language teaching business. But you see, in all of that, what I didn't realize was that entrepreneurship is the one field where there are no rules to study. Nobody's going to love you for being perfect. And I was faced with, as Kristina Mänd-Lakhiani calls them, my dragons. And so my whole adult life has been spent unlearning, in coming back to myself and understanding who am I behind all of that perfection. And so today I want to introduce you to our amazing guest, Kristina Mänd-Lakhiani, who is someone I really look up to. She has been in the personal development field for over 20 years and is the co-founder of the global personal growth platform Mindvalley. She's also an entrepreneur, author of the book Becoming Flawesome, and a mother of 2 kids and a philanthropist. So before I bring Kristina on, I just want to invite you to take a moment, get excited. This is a life on purpose where we look at what does it mean to really live a life on purpose from a holistic lens. And we're going to be looking at how is self-acceptance really the missing link for entrepreneurship and beyond. So Kristina, welcome. It is such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Lena. I was so fascinated by your story. It's really, in a way, the decorations are different, but it's unique. For giving me the opportunity to be here on your show.
Thank you, Kristina. It is such a pleasure. And let's dive in. You just brought out a book, Becoming Flawesome. Congratulations, by the way. And I want to kind of ask you, could you give us a summary of what the book is about and kind of the deeper reasons why you wrote it?
Well, I normally actually don't tell people what the book is about too much, because I believe that the book is a journey, and very often when we take it as something planned out, it's probably not so much of a spoiler, but it restrains our experience. So, but in very, very broad terms, the book is about finding a path back to you. So something what you were talking about just now, that you spent your whole adult life trying to find out who you really are. So my story is not very dissimilar from yours, although the countries and the decorations and the degrees were a little bit different, but very, very similar. You did overdo me with medals by far, but I have a few of my own too. So what made me write it is it's probably a combination of different things. On one side, of course, I was inspired by my own experience. naturally, but I think every writer is inspired by their own experience. But I also, as a background, especially for those people who don't know me or Mindvalley, I have been in personal growth and transformation industry for 20 years, working with some of the world's best teachers and authors. So naturally, a lot of my friends and acquaintances professionally are best-selling authors. So it was one of those things that I took for granted, that sooner or later I'll write a book. And of course, having been in this industry, of course, I would end up with my own message sooner or later. So it just happened so that my message kind of matured. At about 40, I started. I guess I started on this path of trying to understand what exactly has happened and how did I get lost in my own life. I think it happened somewhere around 40. So my message matured. I felt that I had something to share with the world, and I guess I was. Also, I had a lot of free time on my hands because it was the time of COVID, and people during COVID, I think a lot of us had a lot of free time on our hands and existentialist thoughts in our heads. So this is the whole combination of different factors that made me write this book.
Perfect. You know, it's so funny. I'm gonna be honest. I was really nervous preparing for this interview. And all of those inner voices that I've lived with my entire life were like, okay, you've got to have everything in order. I like checked the camera 3 times. But this is really what you're talking about, right? Of allowing yourself to realize that your imperfections are actually the most valuable thing about you. I remember you mentioned something like that in the book, and talked about this a lot in interviews I've seen. So I guess I want to ask you, how do you think we can start, as especially as entrepreneurs, because I have a lot of entrepreneurs in my community, how do we find that pathway back, like that path back to ourselves, in accepting our flaws and facing our dragons?
It's a whole lot of processes involved in this one question. And I don't think that the path for entrepreneurs is much different from any other human being on earth. But one thing I can say from my own experience is that entrepreneurs generally are a little bit more in line with their calling. A lot of the people who choose a corporate career tend to get a little bit more remote or further away from their heart's desire. Although, of course, it's a generalization, because I know a lot of entrepreneurs who are overworked and are slaving for their own companies. So the entrepreneur is just the form, but in essence, it's the same kind of dreadful work. But I think entrepreneurs at least have that advantage that at some point in their life they chose what they want to do. But with that said, I started answering this question by saying that there are a lot of different processes involved in that one question. One of them is trying to remember who you truly are. And it may sound very fluffy on the surface, but when we start digging deeper, we understand that a lot of the times we live in that we build up those facades and we wear those masks, and a lot of the times we start forgetting what is hiding behind them. So while you think that you're making the motions of your life, something which is familiar to you probably over tens of years of life, but there are sometimes glimpses of that lost character that make you feel a little bit uneasy about what you're doing. It's, the very simple way to express it would be a midlife crisis, when you feel that you've done everything by the book, you've ticked all the right boxes, but somehow you don't feel happy, or you feel like you're in the dead end. So there's one process, which is finding your path back to who you are, remembering who you are, or remembering what you're about, what your values are, and seeing how in line your life is to that. And the other process in that question was how to embrace your dragons. And by dragons, I mean our something what we consider our flaws or weaknesses, or our imperfect experiences, or our imperfect origins, the traumas and the wounds that we have. So basically all that dark, shady stuff that we don't want to face because it's unpleasant, it's painful, and it makes us feel less than. So embracing that side, the dragons, is a somewhat next step, I would say. It's a little bit different process, and then the last piece to this puzzle is seeing those dragons as your blessing rather than your curses, and it's not a very simple just turn around. Like, for example, when this interview was supposed to start, so many things went wrong. I couldn't find the link, and your camera went off. Life isn't perfect, but not every imperfection that happens there is there for a reason or is our strength. Sometimes it's just what it is. So the idea that came to my mind when we were laughing at that was that we don't always get to choose our circumstances, but we always get to choose what we do with them. So there are a lot of ways to approach your question. So where would you like us to go?
Well, yeah, I know it's a very loaded question, right? And I think when I think back to your book, actually, you know, you talk about a lot of, it's like a mix of what I think it's become for me like my ego's best worst nightmare. It's like, you know, that best friend that tells you the truth even when you don't want to hear it, but you're super grateful after you hear it. I feel like as I was going through your book, that was what it felt like. But you know, you talk about like in facing your dragons and realizing that okay, like it's life is not going to be perfect. One thing that stood out is you mentioned like starting with awareness, right? And we hear this a lot, like it's one of those buzzwords: become aware of yourself, become aware of your circumstances. But like, how do we actually do that? And maybe you can share some of your journey in when you started to realize that hold on, something isn't right here. I've done everything by the books. I'm supposedly successful, but I'm so unhappy in my life.
You have a talent of of actually digging really deep, very quickly. So basically, awareness is, and again, this comes from my very long experience in personal growth and transformation. But I think that transformation starts, in essence, with the habit of awareness, because you can't even realize that you want to change anything unless you start noticing what's going on in your life. And very often we live on autopilot. There are reasons why we do that, partially because we do need to simplify our life. So that's why we create practices and traditions, and we have habits, because we need to simplify our life to a degree. But while initially we create those rituals around our life to help it or to optimize it, at some point they may start working against us. So it's just a natural tendency of our human mind to go on autopilot, to preserve energy. And sometimes we get so busy, we keep ourselves so busy that we don't notice what's going on. We don't notice the autopilot, not what's going on. We don't notice the autopilot. A very probably simple and familiar example would be when you leave the house and you can't remember if you've locked the door. I think we've all done that. And in extreme cases, I've discovered myself driving to my old address without even thinking, or looking for my phone while I'm talking on the phone. So we are on autopilot as just a natural desire to simplify our life and to preserve our brain energy, and that's okay. The other aspect of it, which I actually don't talk about in the book, is that yes, there are still glimpses of what's going on in our life, no matter how much in a hamster's wheel you might be. But we usually have the feeling that something is off. And that feeling very often expresses itself in you catching yourself thinking or saying that I shouldn't be feeling like this. I shouldn't be saying this. I shouldn't be thinking this. A very simple example is being this incredibly successful. You have your business, you have your family, and then you somehow feel that you're not happy, and then you feel ashamed for not feeling happy, and you start shaming yourself. How dare you? You have everything that other people are dreaming of. So that those kind of wrong sensations are very often the glimpses of that reality which we are too busy to notice. Now, what happens is that, I do believe we all have those feelings from time to time. What happens is that very often when we don't want to face them, when we don't like to deal with that cognitive dissonance, where what you feel doesn't seem right. I shouldn't be feeling this way. So what we do is that we busy ourselves with familiar things, with the things which are excusable. For example, we become extremely busy at work, or our business becomes top priority, and we don't have time for all that other nonsense. And that's how we perpetuate that whole fog of our life. Like as I said, your body kind of makes the motions of your life, but the main character is missing. I know I actually have a feeling that I probably sound a little bit cryptic, and I'd really like to see you right now. So if you could come and join in the conversation. And I don't hear you, but at least I see you.
Yes, I just said I just wanted to give you the stage and let our audience see you. But wow, I think a lot of people can relate to what you said. And it's so funny. You mentioned shame, because I think one of the biggest things with when we feel ashamed, right? It's we feel like we're the only human beings on this planet who experience those feelings of like, there's something wrong with me. I shouldn't share this. And I know Brene Brown talks about this as well, of like, shame is like when you put it on a petri dish and you shine a light on it, that's when it actually dissipates and disappears. And wow, just so much that you went into. I get what you mean by it's cryptic, right? Because I think as well, it's for every human being, it's going to be a little bit different. But what stood out to me in what you just said is really that even if you're an autopilot, even if you're going through the motions of life, you have these glitches and these moments of where you realize something is not okay. And I guess I want to kind of maybe this will help clarify it a little bit. I want to lead into maybe a bit of a controversial question, but you having been in the personal growth industry for 20 years, a lot of the industry, I would say, is geared towards this thing of there's something you need to fix with yourself. Everybody has something to be fixed, and it's all about the positives. I see very little material about like embracing those imperfections and embracing your flaws. And so, to some degree, how do you think that, or do you agree with that, first of all? Because I might just be, it might
Well,
just be my opinion.
No, I absolutely agree, and it's not just industry, personal growth and transformation. Pretty much any industry does work on that idea that you are broken and we need to fix you. And don't worry, it's not your fault, but I know how to help you, and everybody else is lying to you. So I believe that a lot of you recognize the very traditional marketing scripts. Entertainment works on a very similar basis. News work on the same basis, although news and entertainment nowadays are almost the same. So a lot of industries work on that idea, because that's we are geared towards. We think. And I think that there's probably truth to that. It's easier to sell things to people if you hit their pain. So it's kind of natural to hit people's pain. Then on the other side, the problem is that obsession with perfection is usually the cause why we have the dark side. And that's something which we very often don't see. We think that, but I want to be a better person. Isn't that a good pursuit? Yes, it's a good pursuit. But the problem is that if you don't accept the person that you are right now, and I'm going to ask a very philosophical question. How do you know you're becoming a better person? And it's very simple. It's like, a better compared to what? Where's this starting point? A very simple analogy is, I live in Europe. I'm in Europe right now, and I have a car. And if I were to go to Paris, I could drive there, and I would put Paris in the navigation system of my car, but my navigation system will only switch on when it knows where I'm starting from. And whether we like it or not, in personal growth, it also works. You can change, you can evolve, but for that, you really need to start with the acceptance of what you are right now, which is the hard part. Now, I'm coming back to the idea of that obsession with perfection creates the dark side. It's it's a paradoxical thing. And everybody knows this phrase that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And that's exactly how it happens. I know what it means to be the best version of me.
Mm.
But probably you're not that person yet.
Mm.
Quite likely we are not that person because, as Dali said, if you're afraid of perfection, don't be, because it's never, you're never going to attain it. So what it is to be the best version of you, but very likely the current version of you is not that best version of you. So what happens is there's a gap between the aspiration and the reality. And when we see the gap between the aspiration and reality, what we normally do in everyday life, we just lie to bridge the gap. And we do the same to ourselves. We fill the gap with our own, usually with an illusion. And in my book, I talk about all sorts of ways how we trick our mind to make reality more palatable. But what happens is that everything which we can't face, for example, that my reality is so far from my aspiration, we sweep it under the rug. We push it in the dark corner. We pretend that it doesn't exist. We start working extra hard on becoming that other thing. Not what I am right now, but what I want to become. But what you are right now is unresolved. And it's not going to disappear just because you're so intent on becoming something else. So that dark side, that corner with all those dragons that you don't have the capacity to deal with, because it's this huge gap, they don't disappear. And then later, sometime later in life, we will have to face it. And that's how this obsession with perfection very often creates the dark side that we later have to heal.
I think you answered a question that a lot of people tend to have in their minds, but never maybe really express about, like, well, what happens if I don't accept myself? Or we see this perfection as being something noble to chase almost, because it's this term of perfectionism. You hear people all the time say, oh, I'm a perfectionist, ha 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 ha.
That's my biggest flaw.
Exactly. Oh my goodness. Yes. Any job interview. What's your biggest flaw? I'm a perfectionist. And it seems to me that we really don't understand the dangers of it fully, of striving to be perfect, especially as entrepreneurs. All you see, particularly on media, is, hey, my 7-figure business, and look, I went from this to this, rags to riches type of thing. But we see very few examples of the journey in between. And what you shared about that realization that everybody comes to who's been on that path is that you can push them away and be successful for quite a long time, but inevitably they're going to come out under the rug and it's going to hurt a lot. What do you think are some of the ways that our friends, our peers, society in general don't help in us being so critical of ourselves and of not accepting of who we really are?
So I'll first make about a little disclaimer about perfectionism, and then I'll attempt to answer the question unless I go on a rant and forget what you asked. So it's not just perfectionism, of course, which our dragon. When I talk about our dragons, and by the picture of perfection, I mean that best version of you. And for men, for example, men usually don't associate with perfectionism as much, but for them, it's success. It's the picture of strength. It's the opposite of being the loser. So it's usually an aspiration to be something, what I talk about, not so much perfectionism as such. With that said, also perfectionism is not the biggest flaw for most of us. It is a hindrance. It's a tough burden to carry, but we have our flaws that we very often refuse to admit, like vanity or being obstinate or being lazy. And I just mentioned some of my own, but I'm sure you can think of other less sexy and less palatable flaws and dragons. Yes, and exactly that happened. What was the question I was planning to answer?
That's okay. So I was asking, how do you think, our friends and peers in society,
Yeah.
like
How they induce us to be critical.
yeah, yeah.
It's Yeah, it's interesting because, it doesn't happen straight away. When we are babies, we're usually quite praised for everything we do, even when we just burp and and eat. Well, eating is such a success. But at some point in life, yes, we start getting criticized. And I think um, it's not so much that somebody does that to us unknowingly. It's the whole paradigm in which we live. So it's not so much the parents and the peers who are to blame, but the paradigm that the society has bought into. And the way we understand success nowadays is that it requires sacrifices, has hard work, working on your weaknesses. So all those things, or this hustling, the resistance, all those things are part of the picture that we buy into. We as a society believe that this is what it means, what is required for you to be successful. I call it the red marker technique. So the analogy from school would be that you write an essay and your teacher takes a red marker and points out every single place where you were bad, you made a mistake, you were wrong. And then the teacher gives you back the essay and says, work on your weaknesses. And this is just the paradigm. I like to call it the paradigm in which we as a contemporary society exist. Of course, there's another paradigm, which is not incredibly popular, which is called the green marker technique. So by the same analogy, the teacher takes your essay, highlights everything where you were a genius, where you were good, where it worked out really well, and gives it back to you and says, work more on this. So rather than work more on what you're bad at, work more on what you're good at. You as a person with a lot of medals and me as a person with a lot of medals, we know how the red marker technique works. The whole society buys into that because that's exactly what we see, say, in popular culture, in books, in movies. Rappers, I think, sing about that too. So it's just what we believe in. Now, how I know that it is a very prevalent paradigm is such a phenomena as burnout or imposter syndrome. We burnout. It's because we actually stop noticing our biological signals and keep going. Something which actually a live creature wouldn't do to themselves unless they are punished. A living thinking creature actually wouldn't torture themselves voluntarily. We humans do that. Imposter syndrome, although it's not very straightforward example of that, but very often when we think that we reach success easily, we start feeling that something is wrong about it, that it's unsustainable, that it's impossible. People have to figure me out. I'm in the wrong place. I can't be successful. I didn't sacrifice everything for it. So there are a lot of examples how people have to put everything on the altar of success, and very few examples of how you can be successful by doing what is meaningful to you, what you love, what you're good at. There are not a lot of examples of that, and even those examples are mingled with that idea of red marker technique. So naturally, when we grow up, we buy into that, and we start believing that for any kind of progress and evolution and growth, we need that kind of punishment or criticism or fire under our asses. And if we don't have it, we are not going to grow. So another way to look at that is that we often think that people by nature are lazy and stupid. And that's what society tells us. People by nature are lazy and stupid. I think we are neither. We are not lazy, we are overworked. We are not stupid, we are wounded. And if you believe in the goodness of human nature, you suddenly realize that you don't need to punish a human for the human to want to grow and evolve.
I needed to leave a pause there to let that really sink in. Wow. I think that you are really onto something revolutionary, because I think ask anybody and they will tell you exactly that. There's no pain, no gain. I'm only deserving of XYZ when I, punish myself, burn myself out, speaking from experience, and just this, yeah, this whole thing about your beliefs and equating success to struggle, that everybody, it's celebrated everywhere, these journeys of toughness, of hardness, etc., etc. But coming back to kind of, well, looking at this field of entrepreneurship, especially, right, where that's what we see, that's what's put on the pedestal of, I need to go through really tough years and I need to sacrifice my entire self and my entire life, to make a living. But something that I have personally found in my own journey, I guess, that I wanted to share, that leads me to my next question is, funnily enough, when I was, being the perfect hustler of, working all these 18-hour days and creating things every day and having back-to-back lessons and everything. When I was the most burnt out, I was also the least successful I've ever been. And when I started putting my self-care first, I set really big boundaries in my life, which was scary. And when I put my family first, I actually had the greatest revenue and the greatest success and happiness that I've ever had. And I really do credit that to accepting myself and becoming more aware of, okay, what can I do and what am I actually not good at and why am I striving to do everything? And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, especially ones that I've worked with as a coach, tend to be really fearful of bridging that gap, right? Of taking that leap, because everything might fall apart, even though everything actually is already falling apart. So how do you think that that's like self-acceptance, like truly accepting yourself for everything that you are, is like leads to really being able to build a sustainable business and life, and whilst taking care of your well-being and whilst having the things that matter to you really also be nurtured? How do you think self-acceptance helps to do that?
So we have to build a logical chain. First of all, self-acceptance is a crucial part of well-being. You cannot be truly happy, and I'm talking about happiness not as an emotion, but as a state right now. You cannot truly be at peace, well, in essence, be happy in your life unless you learn to accept yourself. Because even when you achieve your wildest dreams, if you have any doubt about your own worthiness, or if you don't like yourself, the best of paradise is going to be tarnished and poisoned. So you have to understand that self-acceptance is a crucial piece of your well-being. Now, the next logical step is that we often think that we have problems in business which are more important than our problems with well-being or our, personal problems. Where in reality, we have personal problems which translate into our business, or they translate into our relationships with our children, with our lovers, and so on. And this is the causality which a lot of people get wrong, especially the more you are in the hamster's wheel. It's so tempting to say that, no, I don't have time for my well-being because my business is in crisis. And trust me, I know what it means to have business in crisis. I had a business in Russia for 20 years. By the time when the war started, which was last year, you can imagine what I have already by then experienced. So, and I can tell you from now 1 year down the road after the war started, and this was probably the biggest shakeup for my Russian business. No, yeah, there are circumstances which might be challenging. The circumstances might change, but your success depends on your well-being much more than on your circumstances. Because your well-being is the determinant of how successful you're going to be, not actually the what's going on in the market, well, in the objective market. So that's the causality that people need to learn to recognize, that you don't have problems in your business or in your private life. You have problems in your well-being, which translate onto all the other areas in your life. Now, why it's so hard to make this leap of faith? It's very simple. And I talk about that in my book in detail, so I won't go into very much detail here because you've read that. Uh, we we notice what we focus on. So whatever you believe in is going to be true for you. And I'm simplifying it very much right now. So if you believe that success requires sacrifice, your living experience is going to be the proof of that belief, because that's how beliefs work. It's based on the reticular activating system, which actually filters out all the stimuli because there is so much happening around us, so we don't notice everything. We actually notice only the things that we focus on. So because of that, we notice the things that we believe in. So if we believe that success requires hard work and sacrifice, that's what we're going to notice. So for us to make that leap of faith, it's not about you yourself forcing to do something which seems counterproductive to you, counterintuitive. You have to really learn to open that door of opportunity and allow the doubt to creep in. Because if you believe that success requires sacrifice and you're going to take time off for your well-being, your belief system is going to activate this whole process of you proving to yourself that you were right and that alternative point of view was wrong. So an analogy would be when you go to the gym and you exercise, you know that you have exercised well because your muscles are burning. So if you come out of the gym and your muscles are not burning, next time you go to the gym, you'll add extra weights. So if you believe that success requires stress, resistance, sacrifice, you will subconsciously create the circumstances so that you believe in your success. And if you remove those circumstances, you will actually sabotage your own success because that's counter to your belief system. So the problem is not to actually make that leap. Well, sometimes we have to do the leap of faith. And again, I'm talking so generalized right now that maybe to some people. So some people maybe are ready for the leap of faith, but most people require this little process of transition where they allow the doubt. Just try to notice, can you see any examples of people who actually are successful because they prioritize their own well-being above everything else? Just start noticing. Once you start noticing, your belief will start becoming stronger, and then it will be easier to make the transition. But I understand it's hard. It's hard to make a leap of faith, and sometimes you can drown. You can drown if you're very, very convinced that that's how you've lived, that's the right way.
Wow. Again, I'm left speechless. But I think for anybody who's listening and you're maybe looking for that that answer, we try to think that all of the answers are somewhere outside of ourselves, and you're listening to Kristina, to take all of that in. And I think when we get just that little, like, sometimes all we need is a reminder, of what you just said. Like, maybe what you're focusing on isn't actually helping you, and it's reaffirming all of those beliefs that you have about what success is. And you mentioned sacrifice, right? And I guess for myself personally, I found that there's a difference between sacrifice and abandonment. Like sacrificing something maybe in the short term, and then abandoning something that I know is really like a key and fundamental to my own well-being and who I am. And I've been thinking about this a lot, and I wanted to ask you this as kind of like a final question, because we do hear that a lot, right, about sacrifice. And at some point in our lives, we do sacrifice things. So I would love to know, is there anything that you have maybe sacrificed, or a decision that you made years ago, where right now where you are, you can say, you know what? I'm really glad that I made that decision, or I'm
No.
really glad. No.
No, you see, sacrifice is really poor start of anything, any relationship. So the moment you sacrifice, there is sacrifice in essence means that you're giving up something which is important to you for someone else. Like it has the word sacrifice itself has that painful experience in it, and there is resentment, which is a seed of resentment in it, which actually is going to influence your relationship. So wherever I was sacrificing myself, in the end of the day, I always noticed two things. First of all, it was pointless. Second, it was very often a huge burden on people for whom I sacrifice. Because people can see through your stories, through your lies, and we are just making a huge logical jump right now because we haven't talked about delusion at all. But people usually see through the stories that we like to tell ourselves and the world about why we do certain things. Sacrifice is a poor start of anything. Yes, occasionally there are circumstances like in Harry Potter, and that's a fictional book, of course, but there's a difference between sacrifice and choices. There's a difference between hard work and determination and persistence. There's a difference between sacrifice and being consistent and being committed. These are huge differences. That's why I insist that people need to go deeper into the essence of things. I think the only right basis, whether it's for relationships or for business or anything that you do, is a choice that you make. And here again, you have to trust yourself. You're neither lazy nor stupid. If you give yourself the benefit of the doubt, you will actually discover how amazing you are. And then you'll make the right choices. We think that we need to sacrifice, we need to force something on ourselves. But very often we do the right choices and we know the right choices and we feel good about them because they're based in our essence, in our values, and in not giving up something and keeping that seed of resentment.
Wow. I think that answers everything. What a beautiful perspective. And like you said, I think it's always important to touch on what are the words that we're actually using and do we really understand them. So I want to make sure that I honor your time as well. And it's been such a beautiful experience just listening to you and diving into this topic deeper. As you probably picked up, I am a person that really enjoys depth, so I don't swim on the surface very often. But to finish off, I think everybody can see my love for your book, Becoming Flawesome, but I would love if you could share really briefly with us, like, especially for entrepreneurs who are on this journey in their early years, how do you think this book will help them in, just their journey in general?
I hope that my book is, for people who read it, I hope it gives the permission to feel good about themselves and be kind to themselves. And I believe that kindness is the superpower that opens the doors to courage, to bravery, to challenging yourself, to actually being good to the world. So I know it might sound not entrepreneurial, but I've been in business for 20 years and I've built a huge business. So trust me, I'm an entrepreneur, very thoroughly entrepreneur. And I can tell you one thing, kindness is a superpower. And if you can learn to be kind to yourself, it's going to make a huge difference in your entrepreneurial journey.
I love that. Thank you so much, Kristina, for your time today, for being here, for sharing, especially about your book, Becoming Flawesome. And for anybody who is interested in getting the book, we're going to have all the links here below as well. Again, I think I don't even need to pretend that I love this book. And if you want to connect with Kristina as well, we'll have all of her links here below the video. So please do go follow her, check out her things, and you're just such an amazing person. So once again, thank you so much, Kristina, for being here. And I hope that you all have enjoyed this episode of A Life on Purpose. We have talked about so many different things, from really facing your dragons to understanding that you're not actually broken, you're unresolved, as you said, and just understanding that you also can't have a successful business or be successful if you don't have that aspect of well-being ticked off. And I want to thank you for saying that as well, because you don't really ever hear that anywhere. And I think that we need better role models and better examples in this space who are living proof of that and who have walked that path and that journey. So thank you so much, Kristina. And thank you everybody for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, and specifically for reading the book. I think it's the biggest gift that anyone can give to me is actually read the book. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Trust me, I had like 20 other questions in my mind that I would love to have diving into, but
maybe we'll have a chance. It was a pleasure, so maybe we'll have a chance again.
Thank you, Kristina. Thank you, everyone. This was A Life on Purpose, and I'll see you very soon.